Good morning. Welcome to the Transatlantic Dialogue. We have Ambassador Karl Erik Norrman with us. Let's discuss. Thank you. Ambassador, it's a pleasure to meet you once again at the Transatlantic Dialogue. What is this Transatlantic Dialogue all about?
Well, first of all, it's an initiative by a friend of mine, the ECP member François Carbon, and very much supported by another friend, the former Luxembourg Minister of Culture, Erna Henniker-Schöpkes. They felt that a dialogue with American universities would be fruitful. It started in 2008. I was not part of the first session, but both these two were part of our European Cultural Parliament, so rather soon I and many other ECP members also got involved in this dialogue. So it's a dialogue mainly between teachers, professors, and many students of a number, I think 6 or 7 American universities and some European universities, and of course some members of the European Cultural Parliament have taken an increasing interest in this project.
This is a very interesting project which is there. Now, does this focus only with the universities of both the nations to come forward, or how is this?
Yes, you could say basically it's an academic project with academic participants from both sides of the Atlantic. But it involves also artists and other cultural personalities particularly from the European side, to some extent also from the American side. And in the case that the American universities have an culturally oriented or artistically oriented education, they usually bring some singers or artists and so on to contribute to this dialogue and to these conferences.
So bridging the gap is one of the most important things. And how does this transatlantic, which are the areas that which are open now for bridging the gap?
Well, let's say it has a certain history. So in 2008, when it was founded, there you could say that there was a certain political, emotional almost gap between the United States on one hand and Europe on the other hand, because of the Iraq War, for instance, and the different attitudes to this war. As you know, several important or most European states chose to not participate in this war, or even to really actively distance themselves from these activities. So from that feeling, for the first time, well, not really the first time, the second time, there has been since 1980 a tendency that Republican presidents have taken positions which were not very much in harmony with European politics, mainstream politics in Europe at least. This was the case with Ronald Reagan. This was the case, very much the case with George W. Bush, and this was then even more the case with President Donald Trump. So as soon as a Republican president was there was a need somehow to bridge this feeling and say that after all, we share a lot of values, we have very much in common, and efforts also to perhaps build up, there is an historical feeling of gratitude from the European side towards the United States. After all, United States very much decisively influenced the end of on the outcome of the Second World War. So the gratitude from the European side was there, but what was first forgotten, I think, during the Vietnam War, in the 60s and 70s, where the Europeans, majority of Europeans, felt very concerned about the American role as global police. These feelings came back in connection with the Iraq War. The feelings came also back in connection with Donald Trump's presidency. But of course, presidencies change, so sometimes the acute differences or gap is not so big, and then sometimes it's bigger again. But all the time, the need to keep this dialogue is evident, and every participant really appreciates this opportunity.
So this particular dialogue focuses on which themes indeed?
A very broad facet of themes indeed. It can be on the general need for dialogue, the general need for communication, direct communication, and all the time I think that this has been a leitmotif through all the dialogue conferences, that the arts and culture can and should play an enormous role and has a fantastic potential, possibility to build bridges and to open minds for a dialogue and a fruitful communication. We have right now also discussions about cultural diplomacy, because in 2008, when the first Transatlantic Dialogue took place, cultural diplomacy was not yet so much a global concept, not in everybody's mouth, but now it has become accepted, I think, as a very important and very multi-instrument type dialogue. So with very many possibilities to build bridges, everything from arts exhibitions, from multilateral world expositions to football games, to fashion and so on. And so this session, for instance, includes many examples of cultural diplomacy between artists, between journalists, between musicians, and so on. So right now a session is going on about the controversial theme cancel culture, and that is a big issue both in the United States and in Europe. So just to give you examples. And then of course all the time the political development, the tendencies of populism, the tendencies of extremism, of religious fundamentalism and so on, all these tendencies are also being observed and being discussed in this dialogue.
Which are the main areas of differences which you find across between the European Union and the United States? At this moment, which are the political, because the ongoing wars are there, the rise of right wing is there, or like the other things, which is again China being favorable to the US or Europe, which is there. So which are the areas which you find?
Well, as far as the main differences are concerned, I feel that we seem to have a different approach regarding relations with China, because European companies are very much involved in Chinese economy and are quite anxious to have a continued functioning business going on, including investments in China, including a strong and increasing trade. But at the same time, the Europeans, at least the political leaders and perhaps also media, are anxious to point out that China has to improve in terms of human rights and respecting the human rights. So whereas in the United States, it's an issue of pure competition towards China. And it's a competition about being more or less the most important economy in the world. So the language is tougher in the US-China relation than in the EU-China relation. You could say, as far as EU is concerned, this traditional diplomatic relation going on in the conference room, in the bilateral discussion. There is constructive discussion about projects and how shall we go on and how shall we improve, etc. When the press conference comes, the Chinese and the European prime minister or delegate would say, well, we have some different views on the practice of human rights. But so it's a difference between the closed door and the press conference. So that is perhaps, as I see it, the main difference. But the interesting thing today, or post 22, with the Russian invasion in Ukraine, is that two things happened. The European Union united almost immediately as a reaction against the Russian invasion. So there's a strong European unity in the defense of Ukraine. And this unity also encompasses United States. So there's a strong transatlantic unity about the support to Ukraine. So this is the new development which we have had. This was perhaps not exactly what Putin had figured when he was invading Ukraine. This invasion contributed to a more united Europe and a more united transatlantic relation. And it also contributed to a stronger NATO, where inter alia my country Sweden and Finland became members. So at the moment, and I say at the moment, before the European elections in a few weeks' time and before the American elections in the autumn, we could say that the relations at a political level and economic level and, let's say, also a mental level is stronger than since a long time.
Now, the one more thing which comes inside is the wars which are in the other part, in the Middle East, which is down there. Now, European Union has stood together, and the European Union is also in a very difficult stage, because balancing down and European Union supporting for peace. And the similar is what the United States also wants down on peace, which is down there. But at some point of time, there are differences which are coming down, where European Union and the United States could not really bring out the peace that is expected around the world, especially focusing on the Middle East region. Now, this transatlantic dialogue, do you feel that this is really going to further down the peace needs which is there and put forward the European Union views with the United States?
Well, I would say that peace is, of course, a more or less the theme of this whole dialogue. So it's quite clear that this message is. But I would say there's a rather common views between the Americans today and the Europeans today. Within Europe, some differences. Some countries within the European Union are condemning Israel more than, for instance, Germany is doing. So there's the wish for peace is a common peace, and I would say, generally speaking, with some perspective, I would really say that the unity between the American government and president on one hand and the European politicians on the other hand is strong. Condemnation of Hamas terror attack on the 7th of October, but then after some months finding that Israel is going too far and sacrificing too many lives in their response to this attack. There seems to be a rather strong unanimity between the United States and Europe politically.
Now, you mentioned down in the previous discussion, in just the previous question, you mentioned down that the right wings, once they come down to power, especially, or like if I put it as if the Republicans come to power in the US, the relationship between European Union and the US has a little bit of a distance which is there. Now, if Donald Trump comes down to power, because as far like as the votings are going on, the ratings and the media reports are coming down, it's on a very close front which is there. Now, if Donald Trump comes to power, how will European Union handle the relationship further down?
Well, we have had it already once, so I guess it will be more or less the same. Reacting to what Donald Trump is doing. There were some issues during his presidency on the trade business, for instance, on inequality in terms of trade conditions and tariffs and etc. And we will see if they come up again. Then we don't know what will be his attitude to the Russia-Ukraine war, for instance. We also don't know what his attitude will be to the Israel-Hamas war. The Europeans, I feel that there is an increasing feeling among European politicians and perhaps also academics and ordinary people that Europe has to become more self-sufficient in terms of security, in terms of their role in world politics, in global politics. We may have relied too much on American security, on the American nuclear umbrella, etc., for all these years after the Second World War, where, of course, Europe had a strong gratitude towards the Americans for saving the Europeans against Hitler. And Trump has not been the only president who reminds Europeans that they have to spend more to the support of NATO. But President Macron, for instance, and some others are going further and saying that Europe has to take its own responsibility in terms of security, take more of its own responsibility. Excuse me. This does not automatically mean that we are taking over instead of NATO, but now, so this tendency of increased European responsibility for its own security has been certainly also strengthened by the Russian attack in Ukraine. It has been underway somewhere, but there are some resistance also in many camps around Europe, unwillingness to invest too much in defense. But right now, the trend seems to be increased investments in armament and strengthening defense. But we all know that the total cake is only one, and this means that if there is a lack, if there is a strong increase in one part of the budget, other parts of the budget will suffer from that. And Europeans have liked to consider themselves kind of world champions in soft power and building up very decent welfare states where all citizens can have a reasonable chance for a good life. And the more you reduce the possibilities for the state, for the public sector to contribute to the welfare state, including arts and culture, of course, and education, the more people will feel uneasy about such a development. So perhaps this is only a temporary increase in military expenditure, and Europe might go back to its emphasis on social development or kind of welfare state. But it's hard to say if that will be possible.
So if I may take one last question to you. Do you feel the UK, who has left the who has moved out of the European Union with the Brexit, has been a big loss in these times? Because now, in these times, if the UK was there, it would have been a bigger strength, especially. So how do you see this?
I think the big losers of Brexit were the British themselves. When it comes to this very critical situation right now with the Russia-Ukraine war, UK stands 100% on the same side as the European Union and the United States. So that is not a problem there. The cooperation within NATO then is functioning. But the British have lost very many other advantages of being member of the European family. And they are realizing that more and more. We will see what happens.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for joining.